Hello and welcome to Toni Morrison's Tribute Month. I'm Sharmila Nambiar and I'm an instructor in the English department. Toni Morrison, one of the greatest writers of our time, is celebrated for her exquisite prose and the lyrical quality of her work. Her novels are noted for their powerful portrayal of the nature of African Americans, especially women who are central to her writing. Morrison delves deep to reveal the disturbing truths and unsettling emotions by returning time and again to several common themes in her well-known novels. Some of the themes she explores are the damaging effects of skewed beauty standards, mother-child relationship, racism, and child abuse. In an interview with The Telegraph, Morrison once mentioned that rather than believing that racism is vanishing, we need to look at the ways in which it manifests itself differently. So today I will be looking at some of the common thematic threads that run through her very first and last novels. In both her first novel, The Bluest Eye, and her last novel, God Help the Child, Morrison explores a condition where racism is imprinted so deeply in the psyche that parents are compelled to reject their own children on the basis of skin color. This takes us to the realm of internalized racism, which can be destructive both for the perpetrator and the victim. So although God Help the Child is situated in a post-racial world of the 21st century, the unsettling similarities with the world of The Bluest Eye, set in a more racially charged environment of the early 20th century, are hard to ignore. So The Bluest Eye was first published in 1970, and that's Morrison's first novel. And the novel is set in the 1940s in Lorain, Ohio, after the Great Depression. God Help the Child, on the other hand, was her last novel published in 2015, and the novel is set in more contemporary times. But both these novels explore some of the common themes, such as destructive beauty standards for African American women, mother-child relationships, racism, and child abuse. So let's talk a little bit about the protagonist of the two novels. In The Bluest Eye, the protagonist is a young 11-year-old girl, African American girl, named Piccola Breedlove. She's often bullied by others due to her dark skin and mannerisms, and feels ostracized by her family and community. So again, her skin color is what alienates her from people who look down upon her. She suffers neglect and sexual abuse at the hands of her parents. And on the other hand, or similarly, Lula Ann Bridewell, who is the protagonist of God Help the Child, also suffers psychological trauma and physical separation from her parents when she's young due to her very stark black color. She is also neglected and abused by her mother and abandoned by her father. In fact, her father is really almost shocked when he first lays eyes on his newborn child, and because of her very, very dark color, or skin color rather, and so he even accuses his wife of infidelity and abandons the family. So this is a quote from The Bluest Eye, where a quote which reflects the kind of craving Piccola Breedlove has for love, or she craves for acceptance and love from people. So when she attains puberty, maturity, she thinks that this might be an opportunity for her to actually get some feel the emotion of love. So in this quote, we have Nicola having a conversation with two other characters in the novel, who are Frida and Claudia. And in this section, Claudia is the one narrating part of the story, and the quote goes like this. Nicola says, "Is it true that I can have a baby now?" "Sure," said Frida. "But how?" Her voice was hollow with wonder. "Oh," said Frida, "somebody has to love you." And Piccola asked a question that never entered my mind. How do you do that? I mean, how do you get somebody to love you? So as you can see here through this quote, we get the sense that Piccola has never really experienced the emotion of love. She doesn't know what it is to be loved by anybody, and therefore it's a very, very traumatic childhood that she goes through. Similarly, Lula Ann Bridewell from God Help the Child recalled she, as an adult, the attitude her mother had towards her as she was growing up. So this is a quote uh, which is part of her memory, where she says, "His taste was all over her face when I was little, and she had to bathe me. I used to pray she would slap my face or spank me just to feel her touch." And again, here we see how Lula Ann is willing to go to any extent to, or is basically craving for her mother's love, that she's even willing to have her spank um, her daughter in order to feel that sense of touch um, and love. So now we delve a little bit deeper into the mother-child relationship and see the effects of internalized racism. So the mother in The Bluest Eye is called Mrs. Breedlove, and usually when a woman gives birth to a child, the very first emotions that runs through a woman is a feeling of joy, happiness, fulfillment, and so on. But Mrs. Breedlove's first moment with her newborn child elicited feelings of despair instead of joy. So this is what she says when she looks upon her child. "She looked so different from what I thought. Reckon I talked to it so much I conjure the mind's eye view of it." She further remarks, "Head full of pretty hair, but Lord, she was ugly." So Breedlove avoids creating an emotional bond with her child, demanding Piccola address her as Mrs. Breedlove instead of mother. Such expressions of loathing shatters Piccola's self-esteem and self-identity. So very similar feelings are also expressed by Sweetness, who is the mother of Lula and Bridewell, and she also has a sense of disdain when she first lays her eyes on her newborn child, and she says, it is not my fault, so you cannot blame me. I did not do it, and it did not take more than an hour after they pulled her out from between my legs to realize something was wrong, really wrong. She was so black, she scared me. Midnight black, Sudanese black. So that is the first impression the mother has of her child. All she sees is a black skin color and not really a whole human being that she is just created. So there's no sense of joy in giving birth to the child. Lula Ann's longing for a mother's warmth and attention motivates her to give false testimony against a woman accusing her of child molestation. So here we see the extent to which Lula Ann is willing to go just to get some attention from her mother, and she colludes with some other children at her school and gives false testimony against a teacher, accusing her of child molestation. But for Lula Ann, it was worth it, because after she gives a testimony and comes out of the courtroom, this is what she remembers, uh, uh, you know, from that time. And she says, outside the courtroom, all the mothers smiled at me, and two actually hugged me. All was Sweetness. As we walked, she held my hand. She never did that before, and it surprised me as much as pleased me, because I always knew she didn't like touching me. I could tell. So this was one opportunity she had to to feel acceptance from her mother, and she was willing to go to any extent for that. So denying her child much needed nurturance, Sweetness contributes to her child's insecurity and lack of self-esteem. In 1974, Morrison had said, "The concept of physical beauty as a virtue is one of the dumbest, most pernicious, and destructive ideas of the Western world, and we should have nothing to do with it." So in The Bluest Eye, we see Piccola obsessing over her ugliness. And as the narrator says, long hours she sat in the mirror, looking in the mirror, trying to discover the secrets that made her ignored or despised at school by teachers and classmates alike. So this was the experience that she went through, not just with her parents, but with everybody around her, her teachers, her school, and so on. Nicola craves for blue eyes, believing they are a symbol of beauty and would change the way others perceived her. She understands that adults, older girls, shops, magazines, newspapers, window signs, all the world had agreed blue-eyed, yellow-haired, pink-skinned doll was what every girl treasured. So again, the standards of ideal beauty espoused by the Western world is what she internalizes, and she feels the only way she can find acceptance is by um, having blue eyes and yellow hair. She is further convinced that if those eyes of hers were different, that is to say, beautiful, and she herself would be different. If she looked different, beautiful, maybe Choli, Piccola's father, would be different, and Mrs. Breedlove too. So she feels that it's only if the perception of others changed would she gain some acceptance from her family. So it's basically she looked at herself through other people's eyes. Here we see how the skewed standards of ideal beauty manifested within the black race um, and affected the mentality of young girls like Piccola. Her childhood is predicated on the reflection she sees of herself in others' eyes. As the narrator surmises about Piccola, she would only see what there was to see, the eyes of other people, which is a very, very disturbing way to live your life. The the projection of unrealistic standards results in the internalization of these ideals within the minority group, engendering a feeling of inferiority and self-contempt. Self-hatred is now displaced on to future generations. So in God Help the Child, we see Lula Ann suffering much of the same consequences of being perceived as ugly due to her very dark skin. On seeing her dark-skinned baby, her mother ardently exclaimed, "I wish she hadn't been born with that terrible color." Although with time, we see Lula Ann become a successful executive in a cosmetic company, and she's seen as a stunning black-skinned beauty. Her mother still believes that her color is a cross she will always carry. So it's a feeling. It's that sort of an oppression that is ingrained in the African American community that is very, very hard to come out of. Even though Lula Ann, being more of a product of the 21st century, tries to carve her own path and become successful in her own right. Lula Ann achieves professional success as an adult and transforms herself and changes her name to Bride to divest herself of all the traumatic childhood. She still carries the burden of those scars, and which complicates her life and her relationships with others. As Bride realizes, memory is the worst thing about healing. Her journey towards claiming her dignity and selfhood is fraught with emotional and psychological pain, burdened by the memories of the past. I'll never forget it, she says, and even if I tried to, the scars, let alone the shame, wouldn't let me. So even though she is successful, she still carries the burden of her childhood trauma and the scars, into her adult life. So towards the end, we see a fragmented self in the bluest eye, or fragmented self of Piccola in the bluest eye. Piccola, after her devastating experiences, especially being raped by her father, so this is is almost like the last straw for Piccola. Her father comes home one day in a drunken stupor and rapes her, and even after the rape, there's nothing changes for her. Her mother sort of doesn't show any sympathy. Her father ignores her, and she tries to find a way to escape this very painful psychological trauma that she just went through, psychological as well as physical. So Piccola's only means of escape is to withdraw deeper into the world of fantasy, where she no longer feels invisible to the real world. So what she does is she takes refuge in the words of a psychic and believes she has finally been granted blue eyes she so desperately longs for. She can now retreat into her own world and find a way to exist in this unforgiving land. So she, in her um, in a quest for actually living her life in a more meaningful manner, she believes the words of a psychic who says that who sort of grants her the blue eyes that she so desperately longs for, and tells her that she already has the blue. He's given her the blue eyes, and but she would be the only one who can see, and she can now live her life the way she wants. So she, being gullible, she takes it to heart, and that really helps her exist in this world. As Claudia, one of the characters who recognizes the victimization of Piccola, explains, Piccola crosses over to madness, a madness which protected her from us. In Claudia's realization and unwillingness to conform to the dominant culture's ideals of beauty, we find hope for the future. So even though Piccola really crosses over to madness, and it's really her fragmented self that we see towards the end of the story, there's another character called Claudia who actually realizes how young black women and children are being refuses to conform to those standards of beauty, and in a scene she even um, breaks a doll that has blue eyes and blonde hair that was gifted to her, and so she understands the importance of being a whole person and not just be identified by the color of their skin, or not just be recognized by the color of the skin. And in Claudia, I think Toni Morrison gives us hope for the future. So people who follow Claudia would be, would be able to exist a more fulfilling life in this world. So now, in God Help the Child, the novel ends on a more positive note. Bride appears to be a more modern version of Piccola. It is as if Bride brings Piccola's hopes to fruition in some manner. While we as readers are introduced only to the adolescent Bride's Bride's journey begins at birth and ends in childhood. Sorry, in adulthood. Forgive me. Earlier on in the narrative, Sweetness tries to justify her neglect of Lula Ann by saying, "Some of you probably think it's a bad thing to group ourselves according to skin color. The lighter, the better. In social clubs, neighborhoods, churches, sororities, even colored schools. But how else can we hold on to a little dignity?" So this is the way Lula Ann's mother's Sweetness justifies her treatment of her daughter, and she feels if she does not treat her daughter in that manner, she's setting her up for failure in the future. She sees her treatment of Lula Ann as a preparation for a child's future and mistreatment she will face due to her skin color. While the scars of childhood trauma haunt Bride even as she navigates a successful career as an adult, Morrison allows her to begin her healing process by compelling her to confront the buried secrets of her dysfunctional childhood. During her journey, Bride comes in contact with other characters who carry the burden of past traumatic experiences, and as kindred spirits, they are able to retrieve and reconstruct their traumas and finally reclaim their dignity and selfhood. So it ends on a positive note, and so, Lula Ann or Bride is later able to see herself as a three-dimensional person, not just somebody who's identified by the skin color, and not just someone who is informed by the trauma of her past, and she moves forward and tries to live a more meaningful life. Now, I would like to just leave you with a little audio clip. Actually, this is a video, but it didn't transfer very well, so I'm going to just play the audio clip of Toni Morrison reading from God Help the Child, also reflecting on her passion for writing. Thank you all so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope all of you have a great day.
I know how to write forever. I don't think I could have happily stayed here in the world if I did not have a way of thinking about it, which is what writing is for me. It's control. Nobody tells me what to do. It's mine, it's free. It's a way of thinking. It's pure knowledge. Ready? God help the child. It's not my fault, so you can't blame me. I didn't do it. I had no idea how it happened. It didn't take more than an hour after they pulled her out from between my legs to realize something was wrong. Really wrong. She was so black. She scared me. I wanted to focus in this book about the confusion there is about race. This girl is abused by her mother because she's born really black. So I wanted her journey to be about becoming a three-dimensional human being. I didn't discover what I wrote until later. I came at it as not a writer but a reader, and such a story didn't exist. Every little homely black girl was a joke or didn't exist in literature, and I was eager to read about a story where racism really hurts and can destroy you. I told her to call me Sweetness instead of mother or mama. It was safer. Being that black and having what I think are two thick lips, calling mama would confuse people. I even thought of giving her away to an orphanage someplace. I was scared to be one of those mothers who put their babies on church steps. What I've learned to do and what I really feel proud about is being able to say more with less. Let the reader enter with his or her own imagination, and that makes us co-conspirators, as it were, together, the reader and me, simply dumbstruck by her beauty. Booker stared open-mouthed at a young blue-black woman standing at the curb laughing, her hair like a million black butterflies asleep on her head. He put the trumpet to his lips. What emerged was music he had never played before. Low, muted note, held long, too long, as the strings floated through drops of rain.